The summer sun glistened off the still surface of the lake, a peaceful reflection of the tall pines surrounding the wooden cabin. Inside, however, the atmosphere was far from calm. Daniel Myers sat stiffly at the edge of his leather chair, his heartbeat steady yet heavy, for across from him sat none other than the state attorney general. This was not an ordinary afternoon visit. This was a meeting that could determine the fate of his home, his land, and possibly his entire livelihood. Daniel had spent weeks gathering documents, photos, and testimonies to expose the shady practices of his homeowners association. The HOA had been trying to strong-arm him into giving up part of his lakeside property, threatening fines, and even pushing for foreclosure. But Daniel was not the kind of man to bow down quietly. He had reached out to the state's highest legal office, and against all odds, the Attorney General himself had agreed to meet him in person at the cabin. As Daniel carefully laid out papers across the table, explaining each detail, a sudden slam echoed through the wooden walls. The front door burst open without warning. Startled, both men turned their heads, only to see Karen, the notorious head of the HOA board, storming into the cabin with fiery determination burning in her eyes. Her voice thundered through the room. "Get out of this house." Daniel's jaw tightened. He hadn't even told the HOA about this private meeting, and yet here she was, barging in as if she owned the place. Behind her, 2 police officers hovered uncertainly by the doorway, clearly unsure why they had even been called. The Attorney General slowly rose from his chair, his face calm but his eyes sharp, watching Karen's every move. Daniel could feel the tension twisting the air, like a storm about to break. This was no longer just about property lines. This was about power, intimidation, and justice colliding under one fragile wooden roof. And for Daniel, there would be no turning back now. The silence that followed Karen's furious entrance was so sharp, it almost stung. The 2 police officers shifted uncomfortably in the doorway, exchanging confused glances. Even they seemed unsure why they had been dragged here, their hands resting idly on their belts, waiting for direction. Karen, however, wasted no time. She pointed a trembling finger straight at Daniel. "This man is trespassing on HOA property. He has no legal right to live here, and I want him removed immediately." Daniel's lips curved into a bitter smile. He had been expecting this day, but not in front of the Attorney General himself. Calmly, he reached for the thick binder of documents sitting on the table and pushed it forward. The State Attorney General, tall and composed, opened it with deliberate slowness, his eyes scanning the first few pages. "Mrs. Taylor," he said finally, his tone measured but firm, "I believe this property is deeded solely under Mr. Myers' name. I've reviewed these records already." Karen's face flushed crimson. She sputtered, stepping further into the room, her heels clacking against the hardwood floor. "You don't understand. This land is under the control of our association. He refuses to pay fines, refuses to comply with regulations, and even dares to host unauthorized guests." Her eyes darted toward the Attorney General, then back to Daniel, brimming with fury. Daniel could practically feel the storm of anger radiating from her, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, meeting her rage with steady calm. "Unauthorized guests?" Daniel finally spoke, his voice cutting through the tension. "You mean the State Attorney General of this state?" The room fell silent again. Even the officers lowered their eyes, embarrassed by the absurdity of the accusation. Karen's jaw opened and closed, searching for words, but for the first time in years, she seemed at a loss. The Attorney General closed the binder softly, his gaze unwavering. "Mrs. Taylor, I think it's time we discuss the nature of your association's authority, and why you seem so eager to overstep it." Karen's eyes narrowed. She had come here to intimidate Daniel into submission, but instead, she had walked right into the lion's den. And Daniel knew, deep down, this was just the beginning of her desperation. Karen's lips trembled as she forced a smile, the kind of brittle grin that never reached the eyes. "With all due respect, Mr. Attorney General," she began. Her voice suddenly sweetened. "I only came here to ensure community safety. We have rules that protect our families, our children. And Mr. Myers has been difficult." The Attorney General arched an eyebrow. Difficult, or simply unwilling to surrender his rights? The question cut sharper than a knife. Karen's eyes flicked toward the officers as if seeking backup, but they avoided her gaze. The silence of the room pressed down, every second, unraveling the authority she thought she commanded. Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "Tell me, Karen, when you pushed for new fences, who paid the contractor? When you demanded surveillance cameras, whose accounts did you dip into? And when my late father passed, who tried to claim this lake cabin was abandoned property?" Karen's smile cracked. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her leather bag until her knuckles turned white. That's association business. None of your concern." But the Attorney General didn't let her off so easily. He reached into the binder, pulling out a stamped document. "Actually, it is his concern, and mine. These records suggest you've been levying fines without legal approval. redirecting community funds, even attempting to seize private land. Under fabricated regulations for the first time, Karen staggered back a step. Her mask of confidence was slipping fast, exposing the raw fear beneath. But even cornered, she wasn't the type to retreat. Her eyes darted to Daniel, burning with resentment. You think you're clever, don't you? Sitting here, smug, with your papers and your plies, but this isn't over. You don't know what I've built, the people I have behind me. The Attorney General's voice turned steel cold. Then you won't mind if we take a closer look at those people and exactly what they've helped you build. Karen swallowed hard. She had stormed into the cabin to crush Daniel, but now, every word spoken was tightening a noose around her own neck. And Daniel knew one thing for certain. Karen was hiding something far more dangerous than HOA fines. The room had grown so still that even the tick of the old clock on the cabin wall seemed loud. Karen's shoulders were stiff, her nails digging into her bag as if she could hold her crumbling world together by force. The Attorney General slid another paper across the table. This, he said firmly, is an anonymous report filed with my office 3 months ago. It alleged misuse of HOA funds and hinted at something buried on association land. Something by the lake. Daniel's heart thudded. He hadn't seen that report before. Leaned forward, eyes narrowing on Karen. What did you bury, Karen? Karen's throat bobbed as she swallowed, but her reply came too fast, too rehearsed. Nonsense. Lies spread by disgruntled members. You can't trust enough. The Attorney General cut in. His tone carried the weight of law itself. We already sent investigators to the lake. They didn't just find accounting errors. They found locked storage crates, unregistered, hidden beneath tarps. Care to explain? For the first time, Karen's mask shattered completely. Her breath quickened. Her eyes darted wildly, first at the officers, then at Daniel, then at the door, as if escape were possible. You don't understand, she hissed, her voice raw. This community, it wasn't built for you. It wasn't built for fairness. It was built on deals that keep certain people happy, people you don't want to anger. The Attorney General leaned back slowly, measuring her words. Daniel, however, felt the sting of betrayal burn deeper. His land, his father's legacy, had been dragged into the schemes of powerful strangers. So that's it, Daniel said bitterly. It was never about weeds on my property or paint colors on my cabin. It was about hiding whatever you've been doing by the lake. Karen's eyes glistened with a strange mix of fury and fear. If you keep pushing, Daniel, you won't just lose this cabin. You'll lose everything. I've kept worse men at bay than you in your father's memory. But the Attorney General wasn't shaken. His gaze hardened, unblinking. Then I think it's time those men meet the law head on. Outside, the wind howled against the cabin windows, rattling the glass. Inside, Karen's world was unraveling, and Daniel knew they were only scratching the surface of something much darker than anyone imagined. The silence in the cabin pressed heavy, broken only by the faint groan of the wind through the trees. Outside, Karen's words still hung in the air, veiled threats about men more dangerous than anyone in the room. Daniel leaned forward, his jaw clenched. Tell us what's under that lake, Karen, he demanded, his voice low but steady. No more excuses, no more stalling. Karen shook her head violently, her hair whipping against her face. You don't get it. The HOA wasn't just about rules or dues. It was a cover for shipments, transfers, things people would kill to keep hidden. The Attorney General slid a photograph onto the table. It showed the crates pulled from beneath the tarps near the waterline. One corner was pried open, revealing sealed envelopes, thick stacks of cash, and something even more chilling, documents stamped with foreign emblems. Daniel's blood ran cold. You turned my lake into a smuggling route? Karen's hands trembled as she tried to snatch the photo, but the officer pinned it under his palm. You don't understand, she hissed again. I didn't choose this. I was told where to build, what to hide, and who to silence if they asked questions. You think you can fight them? You think you can win? The Attorney General didn't flinch. We've fought bigger syndicates than this, Karen. The difference is, you've left a trail, and Daniel here has the deeds to prove what land is his. You buried your corruption on the wrong property. For the first time, Daniel felt something shift. A spark of power, of justice, began to push back against the helplessness he had carried for years. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every family who'd been forced under the HOA's thumb. Every voice silenced by Karen's iron grip. Karen's eyes brimmed with tears, not of guilt, but of rage. You're digging graves for yourselves, she spat. Once they know you've seen this, they won't stop until... She bit the rest of the sentence short, her lips pressed tight. The Attorney General's voice cut through her silence like a blade. Then let them come. We'll be ready. Daniel's heart pounded as he looked from Karen to the photograph again. The truth was out. But the danger was only beginning. That night, the lake cabin didn't sleep. A storm brewed above, its thunder rolling like drums of war. Daniel stood at the window, staring at the black water shimmering beneath flashes of lightning. Every instinct screamed that something was coming. And then, headlights. dozens of them. Cars lined up at the edge of the dirt road leading toward the cabin. Shadows poured out, men in dark jackets, faces hidden, moving with military precision. The Attorney General's phone crackled. "Backup's on the way, but you'll need to hold them off," came the voice from dispatch. 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Daniel's fists clenched. For years he'd felt powerless against the HOA, but now, cornered in his own home, he realized they weren't the only ones who could fight. Karen, still bound to a chair, let out a bitter laugh. "You don't know what you've started. Those men aren't here to arrest you, they're here to arrest you." Daniel turned to her, his eyes like steel. "Then maybe tonight, they learn my land isn't theirs to take." The first shots rang out, shattering the cabin's windows. Officers ducked, returning fire from behind overturned tables. The storm outside masked the chaos, thunder clapping as muzzle flashes lit up the night. Daniel grabbed the hunting rifle mounted above his fireplace, a relic from his father, who had taught him that land wasn't just dirt, but legacy. He crouched near the window and fired. One of the masked men dropped instantly, the others scattering into the tree line. The Attorney General barked orders, his voice calm under fire. "Hold the line. Keep them away from the evidence crates." Lightning struck nearby, the flash illuminating the invaders creeping closer through the rain. Daniel's pulse hammered, but with each pull of the trigger, his fear lessened. This was his home, his fight. Suddenly, a deafening crash shook the cabin. The back door exploded inward. Two masked men stormed inside. Daniel swung the rifle, but hard, knocking one to the floor, while the officer beside him tackled the other. The air smelled of gunpowder, wet earth, and rage. Karen screamed over the chaos, her voice raw. "You can't win. Even if you kill them, others will come. The HOA doesn't forgive. The HOA doesn't forget." Daniel wiped blood from his brow, staring at her through the smoke-filled room. "Then neither do I." The cabin shook as the storm raged on. Daniel's breath came in ragged bursts, his knuckles white around the rifle. Outside, the masked men regrouped, their shadows flickering under the lightning. Inside, officers and the Attorney General braced for the final push. Suddenly, the distant wail of sirens cut through the rain. Red and blue lights streaked across. The tree line backup had arrived. The attackers, once fearless, faltered. Their formation broke, panic seeping in. But Karen didn't panic. Still tied to her chair, she smirked, her voice sharp as glass. "You think this is over? The HOA doesn't lose. We own the land, the people, the law." Daniel stepped closer, his boots heavy on the cabin floor. His voice was low, but it carried the weight of the storm outside. "Not tonight, not anymore." The Attorney General gave a signal, and officers surged forward. The cabin doors burst open as state police stormed in, weapons raised. Within minutes, the masked men were disarmed, their bravado collapsing into fear. The HOA's army, once untouchable, now lay in handcuffs on Daniel's living room floor. Karen's face finally cracked. Her confidence wavered as the Attorney General read her rights aloud. She spat in anger, but her words trembled. "You'll regret this. Every inch of this land will bleed before it belongs to you." Daniel crouched in front of her, eyes burning with determination. "This land doesn't belong to me. It belongs to freedom, and you'll never take that." As officers dragged Karen out into the storm, Daniel stepped onto his porch. The rain washed over him, the thunder echoing like a closing chapter. The lake shimmered in the distance, its surface calm again, as if the land itself had endured the fight with him. The Attorney General joined him, resting a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You didn't just save your cabin. You exposed a rot that's been eating this state for years. Tonight, you've changed everything." Daniel looked out. At the water, his father's rifle still in his grip. For the first time in years, he felt the weight lift from his chest. The cabin wasn't just wood and stone. It was a symbol of resistance, of legacy, of standing against tyranny. And though the storm began to fade, Daniel knew one truth would remain forever. When they came to erase him, he chose to fight. And in doing so, he reclaimed not only his land, but his life.